No, it's not the only way this war will end. And by the way, land swap is a euphemism for conquest. So the fact that
Well, the swap implies that each side is giving up something right?
I mean, it implies that, but I'm sure that Russia is going to get more than anything Ukraine is going to be given. And by the way, the land we're talking about is Ukrainian land, back to Crimea in 2014. So the fact that the US president is on television saying he's interested in a land swap is a euphemism. He means allowing Russia to conquer parts of Ukraine.
You also argue that a weakened Russia benefits China more than a strengthened one. How does that align with the idea that Ukraine's victory should be decisive? I mean, is there a contradiction in crushing Russia while containing China?
So you've caught me out in a contradiction very skillfully, and that's a good challenge. Because yes, on the one hand, if the West fights Russia and defeats Russia on the European plane, in the long run, that's going to empower Beijing, it's going to empower China because they won't have a competitor in Eurasia. On the other hand, if you let Russia back into the tent, as it were, and give them something in Ukraine, you've undermined Western values such that the leaders in Beijing can turn around and say, well, look, why don't we just take Taiwan because nobody has any principles? So yes, when I make the argument that we should fight Russia and Ukraine, I then immediately contradict myself about the long run effect of that. But I think that's because, in essence, Kissinger made the biggest mistake in world history and decided to bring China into the tent before it was a democracy.
I want to go back to what you said. You answered my previous question with, it's one way the war could end. What's another way the war could end?
Well, I mean, if
and that was a land swap that you were referring to.
Yeah, so I mean, a land swap would pause the war. It wouldn't end the war because Russia would retool, and they've moved their economy to a long-term war footing. Another way would be to beat them, right? It would be to give them the sufficient long-range weapons in 2022. I mean, we've been talking about this for years now, and I've always made the same argument, which is like, if we just give them the kit, give the Ukrainians the kit, let them finish the job, they can get Russia out of Europe. But again, this
doesn't seem like there's U.S. appetite for that.
There's none, and I think we know why there was none under Biden, because he and Jake Sullivan were worried about Russian nuclear saber rattling, which I think was a mistake. We have nukes too, by the way. But under Trump, it's a bit more of a mystery. Like, why does Trump treat Putin so kindly? Why does Trump treat Putin so well? And it's not entirely clear to me, other than perhaps trying to bring Russia on board, like I say.
And you described this moment as offering Putin, quote, peer status that he hasn't earned yet. So what, in your view, would have been a more appropriate U.S. stance towards China, especially at this stage of the war?
So I think a more appropriate stance, if you're going to meet Vladimir Putin, you do it on neutral ground. You show that you're not happy about it, right? You make the right diplomatic noises that this guy is engaged in an illegal war. You don't invite him to Alaska, which, by the way, has bad juju, because if we remember, Alaska used to be Russian, and it's a bit of a flex on Putin's part to be able to get over to Alaska like that. But look, I mean, people like me would say you don't do it at all, and that we are far past the point of diplomacy.
How far past the point are we?
I don't believe that.
Look, we obviously can't go back in time, but I asked that question with the question about, is there any way to salvage that?
I mean, that's another way of asking, I think, like, how far into this war are we? How long will this war continue?
Well, we thought 3.5 years ago would be 2 weeks or 1 week or 5 days.
Yes. And I guess another point would be, what is this war? Is this war a wider regional confrontation? If so, does giving Putin what he wants now something that will stop that trend or continue it? I would argue continue it. And so, but look, it's very difficult for analysts, because on the one hand, we have the example of appeasement in the 1930s, and the clear lesson of that is you should actually fight the bad guys. And on the other hand, we have the very clear lesson from the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the very clear lesson of that is maybe you should talk to the Russians. So we're kind of flying in the dark here, because I make one argument, which is very hawkish, and some very sensible people, including the administration, make exactly the opposite argument.
You also mentioned a, quote, American right-wing obsession with post-democratic Russia. Do you think that this ideological admiration is truly driving policy, or is it more a fringe narrative that's maybe being overstated?
It's a bit weird, right? It's difficult to tell to what extent the alt-right, so-called, in American politics is literal, and to what extent they're actually just saying things that they think will get airtime, or saying things that they think are policies, sensible policies that they need to dress up in a sort of sexier language. I tend to take people seriously when they say things, right? As I get older, I realize that kind of works as a rule of thumb. And when the alt-right says, look, we're in a late stage republic, or we want to be post-democratic, or we don't actually believe that people should vote, my ears prick and I think, okay, maybe that's true, right? I don't know why, I don't know what the benefit is to saying that unless you believe it.
Let's pause on this for a second because we're getting some breaking news. CNBC reporting is that President Trump has extended the China tariff truce for 90 days. The current deadline was set to expire tomorrow, August 12th. You just let out a little bit of a laugh. You're smiling.
I giggled. It's not professional. Taco, baby.
You see, that's what this is?
It's pathetic.
Why?
It's pathetic. I mean, the guy says, here's my red line. This is the date that something's going to happen. This is absolutely written in stone. Turns out it's written in sand. And it just makes us look silly. And if he is going to go and meet Putin on Friday in Alaska, do you think Putin's not watching that and thinking this guy has said something and then immediately caved again? I mean, it just really, it's not, I laugh because I laugh in despair, and American statecraft is all the worse for it.
But you're saying this is not good for the credibility of the United States. Perhaps the president or someone else would argue, we just need more time to get these deals done. These are complicated things. Look at the trade deals that happened with China during the first administration. Those took years. They were a phased-in approach. It makes sense that it will take more time.
Well, I mean, you're talking to a former trade official who didn't used to have wrinkles, right? I mean, they do take time.
You're looking good.
Thanks for that. That's the makeup team, Bloomberg makeup team. Yeah, but they should just say that then, shouldn't they? They should say this stuff takes a long time. They shouldn't say in 2 weeks' time, we're going to cure cancer and find unicorns. I think it demeans the United States, and he's actually put us in a lose-lose position. Either we go ahead and shoot ourselves in the foot on the economy, or we reverse course and look silly. And by the way, the economy's doing okay, right? I mean, inflation's around 2%.
We're speaking with Ed Price. He's non-resident senior fellow at New York University, also a former British trade official.
So you mentioned the meeting. What strategic upside do you see for the U.S., even symbolically, in engaging with Russia? Any headlines you're expecting or takeaways?
I expect it to be a failure because Putin is structurally determined to defeat and conquer Ukraine. And if anyone can't see that or understand that, I think they're either woefully stupid, I'll say it, or they're willfully ignorant. Now, it might be that in the very long term, there is a rational US reason strategically for bringing Russia closer to the West because of this forecast of a long-run conflict with China. So that might make some sense. But this is another very difficult position, because if we do get to the point where we rehabilitate Russia after this brutal war, we are undermining our soft power because we're saying it's okay to do that kind of thing, right?
Well, is there a risk too, Ed, that we see Russia continue to move into mainland Europe if the U.S. essentially says a land swap is a way to end this war? Yes, you can have this land because you have used military aggression against it. What's to say they wouldn't do that with Poland?
Well, so Poland is actually a very serious military power. And I think that if you attacked Poland, you might get an even worse response, an even worse bloodier nose than you did in Ukraine if you're Russia. But if it wasn't for D-Day, the Russians would be in Paris today, right? They have a structural reason not to have a functioning European Union, not to have functioning Western democratic economies anywhere near them, and they're going to continue pushing.
Hey, I just want to change subjects. We have 1 minute left with you. Yep. We're getting a question from a listener, viewer right now, who has a question for you about tariff theory, because you're a former trade official. The president has essentially said that academics have gotten this wrong, that economists have gotten wrong. Do you agree with that? Is it too early to tell if academics have this wrong? Just about 45 seconds.
President Trump's argument is that we neoclassical economists have it wrong because there is a bank account somewhere that's filling up with money. He is engaged in linear extrapolation. He thinks that will continue forever. It won't. At some point, demand will shift, supply will shift. You can't have revenue from tariffs in perpetuity.
There is a bank account filling up, though, with tariffs right now. Billions of dollars have flown into it.
Billions of dollars are nothing, right? I mean, compared to the trillions of dollars in debt, I mean, it's 36 point something going up and up and up. And the idea that you're going to introduce these tariffs and make money forever at the same time as saying we're trying to cut off trade is completely silly.